I don't know why, but I really just felt like wearing my lucky come and fish it hat today for this video. Yeah. Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel, and as you all can clearly see, the Ford 200 inline six that I have been making videos on for a couple of months now is actually near completion. It's not done just yet. There's a couple of items that I have to take care of, a couple of fine tunings before I can throw it back into the Ranchero, break in the camshaft, and start actually driving around in. But on today's episode, I wanted to talk about a couple of those fine tuning issues. I also wanted to talk about what exactly I did to the motor itself. For those of you who have been around since day one, there was one direction that I wanted to go in with the motor, but as things kind of progressed, I soon saw that, hey, maybe I should take it into another direction, which is ultimately where we're at right here, right now. Additionally, I wanted to talk about the cost for it. I have noticed that other YouTubers, when they do their engine rebuilds, they don't really talk about the money that they had invested in the motor rebuild itself. Now, obviously, engine rebuilds are not cheap. But the reason why I want to talk about it and show you guys how much money I have invested in this is because, well, if you're somebody who's considering doing this, I really want you to know what you are getting yourself into. So we're going to talk about the parts, we're going to talk about the cost, and finally, I want to talk about some of the tips and tricks to actually get this rebuild done, because there was a handful of little quirky incidences that I had bumped into that weren't talked about in any of the rebuild guides. And I actually had to go to a couple of Facebook groups to try to get answers as to how to solve those problems. And if I can save you guys a little bit of time in this video, well then, you know, I guess I will consider this video a success. All right, let's start with the first issue that I had bumped into when doing this rebuild. So my old cylinder head on this motor, and for those of you who don't know, the motor was running and driving before I had decided to do this rebuild. But the cylinder head was damaged, the old one. Specifically, the threaded bolt holes or stud holes, whatever you decide to use, on both ends were completely broken. And I'm not going to put nice performance headers on something that I believe might have sealing issues. So I instantly started a journey to go and find a new cylinder head. And I will say that this was a complete struggle. It is very difficult to find these cylinder heads for a reasonable price. If you go to eBay, and I think I talked about this in a previous video, there are a handful of 200 cylinder heads for sale, but they are for sale for $500+. And that is for the small log, the non-performance version cylinder head for this motor. Oh, and by the way, they're not machined. They are not bolt-on ready cylinder heads. So you have to not only purchase a cylinder head, pay for all the shipping because the cylinder head is incredibly heavy, so the shipping is not cheap, but then you have to pay for all of the cylinder head work itself to even get it to a state where you can go ahead and actually use it. Now, I had a handful of cylinder head deals completely fall through because I was talking to a ton of private parties to try to get a working cylinder head. And finally, one day I just decided, you know what, I'm gonna go ahead and post on one of the Ford 200 Facebook groups that I'm looking for a cylinder head and I'm tired of my deals going through. So if someone's serious about selling one, please let me know. Luckily enough, I had a gentleman in one of those groups hit me up, and he was not too far from me. So I drove, I believe it was like two and a half hours to his location, and I purchased this cylinder head. This cylinder head was completely machined and ready to go, and it honestly, it ended up also being a large log cylinder head. So for me, it was kind of a no-brainer. Now, the other issue though, when it comes to doing this performance increase. So most people will say that the large log cylinder head, and for those of you who don't know, there's a small log versus the large log cylinder head. The diameter of the intake or the log is larger, obviously, on the large log cylinder head. And everyone says that, hey, this is the way you want to go if you want a performance increase. Although there's no hard numbers. I don't think anyone really knows what this will actually, or what improvements you can see from this. But one of the issues that I bumped into when I purchased the cylinder head was the EGR system. As you guys can see here, there's a couple of holes here. These two holes right here are threaded because the EGR system should have mounted on this cylinder head in this area. But this makes modifying the cylinder head incredibly difficult. So I had originally went out and got one of these conversion adapter pieces. This allows you to put a Weber carburetor onto the cylinder head, but the issue is that it needs to be machined in place. And these holes can make this modification incredibly tricky because, well, since you have to cut into the cylinder head, and with there not being any metal here, it just makes the conversion very, very, very difficult. So if you are somebody who's interested in trying to do something like this, try to stay away from this type of cylinder head. It's still a large log. It's still good to be used for other modification purposes, but it does make modifying a lot more difficult. I ultimately decided that I was going to buy a adapter piece from Clifford Performance, which will still allow a Weber carburetor, specifically a 3838 Weber, to be bolted onto this cylinder head. And I just created a piece of sheet metal that I'm going to be basically bolting down after I put some gasket maker on here to try to close up these holes so that the system can keep running as appropriate. Now, the issue that a lot of people, and this is kind of a tip or a trick, the issue that a lot of people were saying that they were having when it comes to using these adapter pieces is that the inner bolts or studs constantly get loose on them. And one remedy that someone had recommended was to use hot lock. I got this on Amazon. I believe it was for like 12 bucks. And I highly recommend, if you are going to be using one of those adapter pieces, to go out and get this so that you don't have to constantly be taking off the Weber carburetor and retightening the bolts or studs on the system. Another thing that you may have noticed is that I have this fitting piece here. So once again, just due to the era in which this cylinder head was produced, they have a bolt or a threaded hole here. And I'm actually going to be using this system here to run the vacuum for my automatic transmission. Now, one thing that I do recommend is, if you are going to do something like this, is to try to make it look as good as possible. So I went out and I bought this very, very nice vacuum line. It's technically fuel line as well, but it can run vacuum, and I'm just going to run it on here like this so that it goes all the way back to the transmission and should be giving it enough vacuum to properly operate. I did try to use a L-type fitting here. So as you guys can see, this is what I was trying to run here. But for whatever reason, even though this is supposedly the same size fitting as this one, the L-type fittings just don't seem to want to work on this cylinder head. I really don't know why. Hopefully one day I can find one that wants to properly fit in there, but until then, this fitting here is what I'm going to go ahead and use. Now, for those who have been around for, well, really since the beginning, you guys may recall that I had an Edelbrock tri-power setup that I wanted to utilize on this motor. And unfortunately, there's two styles of tri-power setups that you can get. Now, you can still buy a tri-power setup for the small log versus the large log from Offenheiser on Summit Racing or any other type of performance modification website. The issue that I was running into was that since I had then or now purchased a large log cylinder head, that Edelbrock tri-power setup is just not going to work on this setup. The way that you have to convert the cylinder head is just completely different. So I would then have to go out and buy a large log tri-power setup, which they, once again, they still do sell, but as we're going to get into now, it is very, very expensive. So let's talk about why I kind of deviated away from the tri-power setup. So to begin with, the Offenheiser triple barrel conversion that they sell on like Summit Racing or Speedway, that normally sells for about let's say $600. I'll try to insert a photo of the ad for it, maybe somewhere around here, just so you guys can see. So not only do you need to buy the conversion / adapter piece for the cylinder head, but you also then need to go out and modify it. And with this cylinder head version that I have that has this system here and the hole here, it really makes it incredibly difficult to actually do that type of conversion. Another issue that you will run into if you are somebody who's interested in doing that setup is carburetors. Now, I bought 2 of these Motorcraft carburetors. These are essentially Holley 1940 models, but I bought these for a really, really reasonable price. And I would have loved to have done the tri-power setup with it. The issue that you're going to have is if you're somebody who's trying to do a setup like this is that these carburetors are very expensive. I bought the 2 carburetors that I have for a really good deal from people who were extremely reasonable for what these carburetors actually are. But once again, if you go to eBay or you go to another supplier who is selling one of these carburetors, they're gonna want $600, $700. I've even seen these things up for sale for $900. And I will tell you right now that is about the same price for a very good Edelbrock or a very good Holley 4-barrel or even 2-barrel carburetor. These little single-barrel carburetors, in my opinion, I will never buy one of these for more than $500 unless it's completely rebuilt. And talking about being rebuilt, that is the other issue when it comes to doing this modification. Since you need 3 carburetors if you're going to do the tri-power setup, you will have to get the carburetor and then you still have to rebuild the carburetor itself. And those rebuild kits obviously cost money, and then it costs your time to go ahead and actually do the setup properly. So if you are somebody who is thinking about doing the tri-power setup, that's something you really got to keep in mind, that it's going to cost you $600 to get the piece. It costs you, it'll cost you maybe a few other $100 to actually convert the piece if you're going to have a machine shop do it. And then if you buy every single barrel carburetor for, let's say, $300, well, you're already at what, $15 plus $100 just to have that set up. And I'll tell you right now that is just, that's really, really expensive, especially because I'm not expecting a whole lot of ponies out of this motor. I'm not saying that I don't want to do it in the future. I definitely do want to go ahead and try to do that type of modification to one of these engines, but I already kind of made my bed with buying this large log cylinder head, and since it was already kind of a pain to convert it, I just decided that I was going to go ahead and buy the set from Clifford Performance. Once again, this is the set that they gave me, because if you go to Clifford Performance, they sell the entire kit. It comes with everything that you need. It even comes with the Weber carburetor itself, the 3838. And it even comes with instructions. It's honestly stupid proof. That sells for $600. And then you're done. Everything is basically bolt on, and then you get to play with the entire system. It's just ready to go. That's why I decided I was not gonna do the tri-power setup anymore. So hopefully that kind of clarifies why we're going with the Weber setup versus the tri-power setup. I still think it's a really, really cool performance modification to make. And there is, in some of the old hot rod magazines, proof that the modification itself really, really, really helps increase the performance out of this motor. It's just that for the cost, and for me personally, I decided that I was going to go this direction. All right, here is another kind of quirky item that you are going to bump into if you decide you want to go ahead and rebuild one of these motors. So I have actually bought 2 different sets of harmonic balancers for this engine, and the reason why I had to do that is because I wanted to upgrade to a 2-groove, a 2-pulley harmonic balancer for this engine. And the 2-groove that I had purchased, I believe was on Rock Auto, the diameter of it is actually larger. And when I tried to install it and then try to install the system here for the mechanical fan, the fan was Well, it was hitting the harmonic balancer. So I had to go back to eBay and buy this harmonic balancer from a supplier that specializes in Mustangs, and it works just fine. The only issue though is that it's a single groove pulley system. Now, back in the day, when you would purchase a vehicle that had one of these engines in it, what Ford would do is they would add an additional harmonic balancer to it. So you can see they have the thread holes here for it, where they would just put on another pulley or balancer, so that if you had a vehicle that had, like, let's say power steering or AC, it could run with it. So if you are somebody who's thinking about upgrading to a 2-pulley system, it may just be more convenient to buy 2 of these rather than risking spending your money on a 2-groove pulley system and then just figuring out that it doesn't work. Now, another weird part that you're gonna have to go out and get is going to be one of these adjustable rocker arm assemblies for the 200. Now, for whatever reason, Ford back in the day decided that when they were producing this vehicle that they were gonna make the rocker arm assembly non-adjustable. Now, this does make working and fixing this motor very, very easy because, well, it's just kind of a bolt and play for the non-adjustable assembly. But if you are somebody who wants to put a way bigger camshaft in one of these motors, you're gonna have to go out and find one of these assemblies. Now, let's kind of focus on the non-adjustable rocker arm assembly just for a moment. And actually, let me grab it for you guys so you can see what I'm talking about. So this right here is the original assembly that was on the motor. This one's all gunked up and I have just not taken the time to clean it up because it's just not worth it. I will clean it up when I get ready to sell it. But for right now, as you guys can see, this system here, once again, is non-adjustable. The rocker arms can only go up and down a certain degree. Now, if you're somebody who is working on one of these motors and you are not trying to put a really fancy camshaft in this motor, you are still in luck. So the non-adjustable rocker arm assembly, you can put a custom grind camshaft, something that is a little bit bigger, because once again, the non-adjustable rocker arm assembly, although its movement is fixed, you can still kind of push it to its limits. So if you are somebody who wants to do something like that, maybe you're working on an Econoline or you're just working on a Falcon that you don't want to, go out and spend the money on an adjustable rocker arm assembly, but you do want to kind of put a bigger camshaft in the 200, go to the Facebook groups that are dedicated to this engine. And if you just do an initial post basically asking, hey, who has a non-adjustable rocker arm assembly and still put in a bigger camshaft, there are a ton of people out there who will give you their cam card, their custom cam card, so that you can go ahead and still utilize the non-adjustable rocker arm assembly, but still get a bigger camshaft in your motor so you can still see that performance increase. And in my opinion, that actually makes the rebuilding of this motor a lot easier because, well, you don't have to go ahead and adjust an adjustable rocker arm assembly like I did. But this really isn't that hard to begin with anyways. It is just easier to do it with a non-adjustable system. Now you might be wondering then, okay, well, where did I get this adjustable system or rocker arm assembly at? Once again, I picked this up on eBay, and you will pay a premium trying to find this system. And I'll talk about near the end of this video how much it cost me to pick up this part. Because I decided I wanted to go ahead and put a way bigger camshaft in this motor, I specifically went out and I picked up a Claysmith camshaft. I'll try to put the cam card in the corner in the video over here somewhere, hopefully. Because I decided I wanted to go that direction, it was almost mandatory. Well, it was mandatory for me to go out and get this assembly, but I'm really happy that I did get it. And I actually look forward to seeing what this camshaft will sound like and the performance it'll give me in the motor. Another thing that you're gonna have to be worried about if you are getting this adjustable rocker arm assembly is the push rods, because when you go to the adjustable rocker arm assembly, you then need the ball and then cup push rod. And the only person that I know of, or the only company that I know of that sells this system, is Clifford Performance. I looked on eBay, I looked on Facebook Marketplace, I looked on Craigslist. I mean, I was getting real desperate. I was looking virtually everywhere for it. And the only person who was able to sell me a brand new set of push rods that were compatible with an adjustable rocker arm assembly for the 200 was Clifford Performance. So if you're somebody out there trying to find that pushrod system, just call Clifford. I'm not sponsored by them, but I will tell you right now, I was super shocked when I just called them. I was kind of desperate, to be honest, because I couldn't find them anywhere. And they were the only person that I called who had them in stock and was able to ship them to me the very next week after I purchased them. Now, here's another upgrade that you won't regret doing for your 200 or 250 engine rebuild, and that's going to be going out and buying one of these HEI style Davis Unified Ignition distributors, aka the DUI distributor. Now, these are handmade distributors. Everyone who has run or is running one of these style of distributors loves them. I have not heard anything bad when it comes to this distributor, so I decided, hey, you know what? If other people are having a good experience with it, I might as well go ahead and just follow the crowd on this one. Now, if you are somebody who is running the stock style distributor like I have right here, and you want to upgrade your carburetor, well, you are going to be running into a lot of problems because the distributor and the 1100 series carburetors, they have a system that they use to communicate with one another. And whenever you try to upgrade one without the other, you will run into problems with the motor wanting to run properly. So since I went ahead and I'm already upgrading to the Weber carburetor, I decided, you know what, at the same time, let's just get rid of that stock distributor to avoid any problems. And, you know, once again, as you guys can clearly see, that's why I went out and I purchased this HEI model distributor. Now, kind of a tip, some of the things that I've heard about HEI distributors on this motor. There are other HEI model distributors that you can buy on, let's say, like Amazon. Now, one warning when it comes to those styles of those style distributors. If you read the reviews on those style of distributors, they are known for basically crankcase blow-by, and they will cause motor to be coming out of the base of them. I have not heard of that problem when it comes to the DUI HEI model distributors. The only ones that I have heard about that problem, them leaking oil, is for the Chinese-made Amazon HEI distributors for this engine. So, you know, just a bit of a warning. Obviously, the ones being sold on Amazon are pretty cheap. I think they sell for about like $100, $150. This is obviously a lot more money. And once again, I'll talk about what I paid for this near the end of the video. But I have not heard of anyone having that blow-by issue when it comes to these DUI distributors. So, in my opinion, everyone loves their performance and they don't seem to have that issue. So just go ahead, save the money, and install one of these distributors instead so you can avoid that headache. And you know what? At the end of the day, man, it looks really, really awesome on this motor. And finally, as you guys can also clearly see, I went ahead and I upgraded to these shorty style headers that I also purchased on eBay. I'll talk about the price here shortly, but just kind of a quick trick or a tip, I guess, for purchasing one of these style of headers. If you go ahead and add them to your shopping cart on eBay and you wait a day or two, 9 times out of 10, the seller will actually offer you an additional discount for this header. And that's exactly what happened with mine. And that's why they're now on this engine because, well, they were already a pretty good deal and the seller decided that they wanted to sweeten that price. So, you know, I couldn't afford not to buy it at that point. Now, another thing that you are not going to see, that this is another one of those tips, one of the things that aren't talked about in any of the engine rebuild guides, is I went ahead and upgraded the main crank bolts to studs. I bought a stud kit from Claysmith Cams once again and installed them on this motor. Now, the very last stud that is right next to the oil pump for this engine needs to be cut down. You have to modify it because the stud itself is way too long. It actually interferes, it will bump into the oil pump. Now, what they also don't tell you is that not only do you need to cut that stud down, but you also need to take a little bit of the meat off of the oil pump as well to have enough clearance. Because even after you cut the stud and the oil pump will still want to touch. They'll just keep touching. And I have a photo of it, and I'll try to post it somewhere here in this video so that you guys can see what I was dealing with. So not only do you have to take a grinder to that stud, but you then have to take a grinder to the oil pump. There's plenty of meat on it. It does not hurt anything, but it's just one of those weird things that you don't know that this is going to be a problem until you start actually bumping into it. Now, there's one other remedy that I have been shown to help solve this problem. The only issue is that I actually don't know if it will work on the 200 engine block, and that is the 250 style oil pump actually has like a groove kind of cut into it or manufactured into it to basically make space for the stud or bolt system. The only problem is that I actually don't know if that oil pump will fit on this style on the 200 engine block. I don't know if there's any size differences. I didn't test it out. You know, I already purchased the 200 style oil pump, so I just went ahead, cut the stud and kind of cut some of the meat off of the oil pump. So it might be something worth testing out if you are somebody who is going to be trying to rebuild one of these motors. Like I said, no one really talks about it. I actually had to go to, once again, one of the Facebook groups and talk about how the heck do I solve this? And everyone's recommendation was, hey, cut into that oil pump, make the clearance happen. All right, now let's get to the good part of this video. What exactly did this cost me? So as a quick reference, if you are thinking about embarking on this journey, if you pick up this book here, this is the rebuild guide that I have used for this rebuild in its entirety. On page number 9, it has a nice little chart of kind of a pricing guide, the cost that you should expect having to pay in order to do a particular style of rebuild. And I'll see if I can kind of insert a photo somewhere around here in this video once again. And in this category for this rebuild, this is considered a substantial rebuild. So the items include a full rebuild. That's going to be your pistons, your camshaft, your new head, and head porting if applicable. And that is priced around $4,000 to $6,000. So the total cost that I have in this rebuild is exactly $4,857.73. And this includes the harmonic balancer, the rear main seal, the rocker arm assembly, the header, the fuel pump, the water pump, the Claysmith camshaft, the Claysmith lifters, the distributor, the temperature switch, oil pressure switch, the push rods, the valve cover cap, and the oil cap adapter piece, the ARP studs, the Clifford Performance Weber kit, the header stud kit, the piston heads, camshaft bearings, piston bearings, freeze plugs, valve cover grommet, main bearings, the cylinder head itself, the engine paint, I haven't calculated the paint into this, and the double roller timing chain that I also bought from Clifford Performance. So once again, this is not a cheap thing to get into. But with all of that being said, I have had one hell of a good time rebuilding this motor. I'm gonna try my best to also link all of the parts that I used in this rebuild in the description of this video. So if you happen to see something that you really liked, you can go ahead and purchase it for your rebuild. If you like this video, please give it a like, and if you wouldn't mind, and if you like this content, go ahead and subscribe. I will be posting a video eventually of me throwing this engine back into the Ranchero and breaking the motor in. So until then, y'all, bye-bye.